but was quickly pushed back because of the risks posed by the COVID-19 Omicron variant. RNZ's Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch reports.
The longer the border's been closed, the more pressure the government has come under as New Zealanders struggle to come home. The strict MIQ requirements are intended to keep COVID-19 out, but the argument weakens as Omicron spreads within the country. Chris Hipkins last year signalled that from the end of February, vaccinated New Zealanders in Australia and possibly elsewhere would be able to skip MIQ and isolate at home. The same would be true for most foreigners from the end of April. Ministers have been reviewing those dates. RNZ understands Cabinet will discuss the matter today.
Western allies at the UN Security Council have urged Russia to de-escalate tensions on the border with Ukraine. Russia has rejected accusations it is planning on an invasion. William Denislow reports from the UN headquarters in New York.
US Ambassador to the UN Linda Thomas-Greenfield said that after more than 100 private meetings, it was important to discuss the escalation of tensions between Russia and Ukraine in public. She added that the Security Council meeting wasn't about rhetoric or ties between Washington and Moscow, but about peace and security of a member state. The US and its allies accuse Russia of amassing more than 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border and fear an invasion. At the Security Council meeting, Russia said there was no proof that an invasion is planned and accused the US of making
The public prosecutor in French Polynesia says there are at least 10,000 consumers of methamphetamine in a territory with fewer than 280,000 inhabitants. Thomas Pesson says that such high use of the illegal drug is not only a crime issue, but has become a public health problem. Methamphetamine use in Tahiti has spread to all levels of society, including to schools. Mr. Bion says that this drug is highly addictive and cuts people off from society. The drug is smuggled in from the United States and sells for up to $8,000 a gram. The US Food and Drug Administration has given Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine full approval, potentially paving the way for more mandates. The move comes as cases decline in the US following the Omicron surge. Here's our correspondent, Iris Bitzer.
The Moderna shot becomes the second in the U.S. to receive regulatory approval following Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. Moderna's jab, which has been authorized for emergency use since December of 2020 and has been given to nearly 75 million Americans, will now be sold under the brand name Spikevax. The full approval is expected to make it easier to require vaccinations in places like schools and offices. Coronavirus cases and hospitalizations are falling sharply in the U.S., following record numbers of cases in recent weeks driven by the Omicron variant.
In sport, a feeling of deja vu for the Wellington Phoenix in the Women's A-League. The Phoenix had been beaten 3-2 by Perth Glory in Sydney after letting a 2-1 half-time lead slip for the second time in 3 games. Grace Jale and Chloe Knott scored first half goals for the Phoenix, who then conceded 2 goals in the last 10 minutes. Coach Gemma Lewis says they made the mistake of trying to defend their lead.
Rather than kind of playing, rather than kind of sticking to our own game. And, you know, they even kind of spoke at half time and were like, oh, should we conserve them a bit more and be more balanced and, you know, to try and get the win. But at 2-1, you can't spend 45 minutes trying to defend a 2-1 lead.
The Phoenix remain bottom of the table with 1 point from 9 games, while Perth improved to 4th. Meanwhile, the All Whites will have goalkeeper Stefan Manovic for tomorrow morning's game against Uzbekistan in Dubai, after he missed their first game against Jordan because of COVID. However, coach Danny Hay has confirmed that midfielder Sarpreet Singh is unavailable through injury.
He hasn't trained since then. He won't be risked. He won't play a part in it. He has stayed here for treatment. Rather than go back to Germany, he chose to make that decision.
In transfer news, meanwhile, Denmark midfielder Christian Eriksen has joined Premier League club Brentford 7 months after he suffered a cardiac arrest during a European Championship match. And there are reports in Italy that Serie A side Empoli is keen on signing all-whites winger Libby Kakathe, who currently plays in Belgium. In his first match since retiring from Test cricket, Ross Taylor will turn out for Central in their Ford Trophy one-day game against Auckland in Palmerston North today. Taylor attended Palmerston North Boys High and hasn't played in the town since 2009. The match will be played behind closed doors. And Formula One will make it mandatory for all personnel working in its paddock to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 without exemption starting this season. And that's the latest news from RNZ Pacific. For more on our stories, go to our website, rnzi.com.
Nissan Bolabinaka, you're listening to Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. Ngo Okoroi Hawkins. First up.
If there is low vaccine coverage, there will be more people getting infected, and that's more opportunities for new variants to emerge.
Could the next variant of COVID-19 come from the Pacific? We speak with epidemiologist Michael Baker.
2 weeks ago, our country suffered a great disaster.
Words of encouragement from Tonga's Prime Minister amid the ongoing recovery from the volcanic eruption and tsunami, and media organizations in Solomon Islands are calling for more accountability from government as the country fights a worsening outbreak of COVID-19. Low COVID-19 vaccination rates across the Pacific are, according to epidemiologists, not just concerning for individual countries, but also globally because new variants of the virus tend to emerge from countries with large populations and low vaccination rates. Papua New Guinea is the closest to this description in the region. It has an estimated population of 8 to 9 million people and one of the lowest COVID-19 vaccination rates in the world, with only 3% of its citizens fully vaccinated against the virus. Health authorities in the country, already facing huge logistical problems in their vaccination rollout, have been further hampered by the spread of misinformation, resulting in extremely high levels of vaccine hesitancy, with many doses of the vaccine acquired by the country expiring and having to be dumped. Alicia Poon spoke with New Zealand epidemiologist Michael Baker about vaccine inequity and the possibility of countries in the Pacific being the source of a new COVID variant.
So in the Pacific, if there is low vaccine coverage, there will be more people getting infected, and that's more opportunities for new variants to emerge. But on a global scale, really, it's partly a numbers game. And so if you have countries where there's huge populations and huge amounts of virus circulating, they are more likely to be places where new variants emerge. And we can see this from the history of emergent variants. The Omicron variant emerged from Africa, which has a huge population, low vaccine coverage, and very intense transmission. And before that, the Delta variant emerged in India, which again had the same situation, the virus infecting millions of people over a period of time, quite a rapid period. And that, again, was the source of the Delta variant. So there is potential in the Pacific, but it may be relatively low given the population density and population numbers.
With a focus on the Pacific, how concerned are you about the possibility of new variants coming from there, our Pacific neighbours?
Oh, it is a real possibility, but again, this is a global problem, and it is a very strong argument for